Yeah, welcome in. Welcome back to another episode of the Format Podcast. Got an interesting show for you here today. Going to talk some John Wall and his comments about the modern NBA. But before we get to that, you know what time it is. If you're here on YouTube and you haven't already, please go ahead, click that like, that subscribe, that notification bell. Make sure you kept up to date whenever we drop new content on the channel. If you want the audio-only version of the podcast, open up your audio podcast platform, hit the search bar, type in the Format Podcast. We should come right up. If you're enjoying the show, please make sure you give us that like, that 5-star review, drop a comment. All that stuff helps us rise in the algorithm, helps us find more sports fans, helps more sports fans find us. And of course, don't forget, every Saturday night at 7 p.m., we're going to be doing the live shows. And if the traffic is right, then we'll allow you guys to do the call-ins, and you can call in and talk to me directly. All right. But yeah, for now, let's get to it. Okay. John Wall, obviously, if you know anything about the NBA, he was an NBA point guard, played most of his career in his best years with the Washington Wizards. And he was a heck of a player. Now, when I say he was a heck of a player, he was a heck of a player in terms of the things that he could do on the floor. He wasn't necessarily a guy that affected winning a great deal, but he's a guy who I believe led the league in assists. He's been all NBA twice. He's been all NBA defense. So he could do it all. He's one of the fastest players I've ever seen on the floor with the ball, too. He's really explosive in the open court. It's just a shame that he was in Washington and not in a better situation when he was young in his career. And now his career is probably over. So that's that. But the reason I bring up John Wall is because he made some really interesting comments the other day on the OGs podcast. And before I get to his comments, let me just say this. So, if you're not new to this show, then you know that a lot of times I get a lot of pushback from the things I say in terms of being called a hater and just hating on this new generation of player and being, trapped in the 90s or whatever. You get a lot of the we done with the 90s, all that crap. But, a lot of people say that. I get pushback, people saying, I don't know what I'm talking about because I didn't play ball at a high level, this, that, and the third. And that's cool. All right, I get it. So, what they're saying is that they will always take the word, and I've had people tell me this directly, they'll always take the word of an athlete, of a player, over the word of a journalist or a podcaster like myself. Oh, okay, that's cool. But then when you find the athletes, and I'm not talking about old school athletes, I'm talking about modern NBA athletes, right? So remember a couple shows back, I showed Jeff Teague and what he had to say about LeBron. Very interesting. I guess he was a hater who didn't know what he was talking about either. But so John Wall had some very interesting comments about defense in the modern NBA. Now, we are seeing every year, we're seeing, for the most part, the pace being pushed. Although, in fairness, I believe that up to now, even though we're seeing the greatest offensive efficiency by the numbers that we've ever seen in NBA history, there are, I believe, 18 seasons on record that have a faster pace than this one. Now, that doesn't mean that this season is slow. That just means there are a lot of seasons that were a little faster. But regardless, we know that the pace is fast. They want to get out and run. They want to shoot a ton of threes. On average, I believe, what's the number here? Teams are averaging 34.5 3-point attempts per game. So that means the average NBA game has just under 70 3-point attempts. And, that's the analytics talking. 2 is always more than 3. And I get it. But, so I'm not going to get into my thoughts on that, basically talking about wasting a lot of opportunities to get easy points because you're always looking for threes. But the point I'm trying to make is, this season, we have seen a scoring surge like nothing we've seen before. I think we had like a 2-week stretch, and I did a show about this a little while back, maybe a month or a month and a half ago. We saw a 2-week stretch of where there were like 5 or 6 60-point games. This was right around the time the anniversary of Kobe Bryant's 81-point game, and then, of course, his untimely passing with himself, his daughter, and 7 other people on the helicopter flight, tragically. So the point I'm trying to make is we have seen so much incredible scoring, and a lot of people, the mainstream basketball media, the mainstream sports media, and, of course, the fans of the NBA as it is today are going to say, well, the reason we're seeing that is because the players are so much more skilled. And don't get me wrong, I've never argued that the players today aren't skilled. But what I have argued is that to say that they're so much skilled than the players of the past, I think that is a stretch. And obviously, and I've said this before, if you watch the show, this. I've talked about the fact that they're allowed to travel in so many cases. They're allowed to carry in so many cases. They shoot so many more threes. So they shoot a ton of threes, but most players in the modern NBA can't make the mid-range jump shot. What does that mean? They traded one skill for another. So I don't necessarily believe that they're so much more skilled today. I believe that the conditions allow them to do the things that they're doing. Now, do they have to put the ball in the basket? Absolutely. But when there's so much less resistance, it makes it a lot easier. Anyway, John Wall, who is a modern player, right? He's a guy, I think he played last season, matter of fact. So he's definitely a modern NBA player. Obviously, he's a great athlete. He's a better athlete than I ever dreamed of being. So let's hear what he has to say. And then I wonder if some of you are going to say, well, he don't know what he's talking about now, because I don't know what I'm talking about because I didn't play on a high level. But John Wall has something to say. So let's hear that.
The NBA, like you said, the game just changed so much, it's hard to watch. Yes. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to watch because nobody's playing defense. There's a lot of shots, and it's just like, for me, it's like going to play pickup. Like, it's like we go play pickup in the summer. Like, you get a bucket, get a bucket. Go one-on-one, go one-on-one. So that's just all it really is.
Wow. Well, would you look at that? A modern NBA player, he must be a hater. He must be an old head. No, I guess he's not an old head, but he must be a hater, right? He must be a hater. And he don't know what he's talking about because he never played at a high. Oh, no, wait a minute. He did play at a high level. He played in the NBA. He's multiple-time All-NBA. He was All-NBA defense. So wait, what's going on here? I don't know. But the point I'm trying to make here is he's not the first player to say this. He's not the first old school player to say this. He's not the first retired player to say this. He's not the first modern player to say this. It's just a fact, okay? Now, what's interesting about this, right? So I think it was on First Take maybe a few weeks ago. They were talking and discussing what can be done to kind of slow the game down in terms of all the crazy scoring and introduce some defense back into it. And one of the things that JJ Redick said was that even if you try to bring back hand checking, it wouldn't work. Why? Because the floor is so spaced out that all these players still have so much room to operate. Now, I think there's a couple things you can do. Now, the hand checking is not going to come back. Adam Silver pretty much made it clear that he wants offensive players to be able to go where they want to go on the floor and do what they want to do. But if it was me, I think bringing back hand checking would be one. I think getting rid, of the defensive 3-second rule would be another one, so that you could get back to having some real shot blockers in the paint. And I'm not talking about just sitting in the paint waiting, but not having to worry about, being called if they're in there for just half a second too long. Like, I think it's important to be able to have some resistance at the rim, because in so many cases in the modern NBA, it's if you can get past your guy first. And don't get me wrong, so many of these guys, the modern athletes, they're so quick and they're so explosive. I'm gonna give them all the credit in the world for that, because of the way they train sports science, medicine, and all that, right? These guys are so quick and explosive. When they get past that first defender, who again you can't forearm check them, you can't hand check them, you can't do anything. So you get past that first defender, now you pretty much got an easy path to the rim. And we've seen that because a lot of a lot of the best players in the NBA take a lot of shots at the rim now. And many times the shots at the rim are much less contested than they used to be. Why? Because, you have Wembanyama, who's an elite shot blocker already. You have Rudy Gobert, who's an elite shot blocker already. And you have a couple more guys. Their names escape me at the moment. But you have a couple more guys. But for the most part, it's not a league where you have a Dikembe Mutombo or Hakeem Olajuwon, Alonzo Mourning, a Shaquille O'Neal, a David Robinson, and Tim Duncan. You don't have Ben Wallace, a whole bunch of big-time shot blockers in the league at one time. And so guys are not worried about attacking the rim the way they used to be. So I get it. But the point I'm trying to make here is, and I think if you just watch the NBA game, it's really, there's so many open three-pointers. And it's not necessarily because guys are moving so well without the basketball or they're executing so well in their half-court sets. It's really a whole lot of like one pick and roll situation and a lot of 5 out and a lot of drive and kick. And so it's like, even if you drive and kick and the defense reacts, it's basically swing the ball until you get an open three. And, I don't know. But the point is, back to JJ Redick, he was saying that even if the rules get changed, he doesn't believe that the way we used to play defense would be effective on the modern players because the floor is so spread. And at first that made a lot of sense to me, but then I thought about it and I said, well, wait a minute, what about what the Boston Celtics did to Kevin Durant a couple of years ago in the NBA playoffs when Kevin Durant was still in Brooklyn? Like, you can still do it. Now, one thing I will say, and I got to be fair and objective here. When it comes to the NBA playoffs and you watch it, you do see the defensive intensity pick up a bit. And so I got to give credit where it's due for that. You do see that. And I've been paying attention to that for like the last 2 or 3 seasons to really see if it does pick up in the playoffs. And it does. Obviously, it's never going to be what it was in the 90s or even in the early 2000s. And I'm not at all insinuating that the league should go back to bad boy Pistons, choke slamming guys, or the old Celtics and Kevin McHale and Kurt Rambis clotheslining somebody out of the air. That's not cool. But what we do need is a little bit of physicality and a little bit of resistance. And the league, to some extent, has allowed a little bit more of that in the playoffs. So I give respect where it's due. But still, at the same time, for the most part, it's still, I'm not going to say a cakewalk, but it's a lot easier than it has been in previous eras. And that's why you're seeing all this elite scoring and all these explosions. Again, it's not to say that the players today can't play. The players today aren't skilled, but they are playing under conditions specifically designed to increase scoring. So anyway, the point I was trying to make here, I thought it was so interesting that John Wall, again, a modern NBA player, who I guess must be a hater, and even though he's a modern NBA player, he must be an old head somehow. He says the same thing I've been saying, that nobody's playing defense in the modern NBA. So it is what it is. Leave your thoughts in the comment section. Definitely want to hear from you if you agree with John Wall or you agree with anything I got to say. And of course, if you don't, I'd love to hear that too. So yeah, make sure you leave your comments in the comment section. Can't wait to hear from you. Can't wait to get back to you. And make sure you check in with us Saturday night at 7 p.m. for the live show. And I'll be back with you next episode. And I'm out. Peace.